The air in New Orleans that morning hung heavy with the scent of magnolia and damp earth, a humid stillness that seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew the storm that was about to break over my life. I woke before dawn in my cramped apartment off Bourbon Street, the creak of the old wooden floors beneath my feet a familiar companion in the pre-dawn silence. I'm Lila Moreau, 31 years old, a historian who's spent most of her life chasing the ghosts of the past, piecing together forgotten narratives from brittle letters and faded photographs in the city's dusty archives. My days are solitary, filled with the rustle of ancient pages, while my nights hum with the distant jazz that drifts through my open window, a melody that feels like a lifeline to a world I've never fully joined. I've always preferred the company of history to people, perhaps because the living have a way of disappointing you in ways the dead never can. That morning, as I padded barefoot to the kitchen to brew a pot of chicory coffee, I noticed something unusual. A single envelope slipped under my door, its edges yellowed as if it had traveled through time. The sight of it stopped me cold, the kettle forgotten in my hand. No one in my building ever left notes. The neighbors were a mix of reclusive artists and transient musicians, none of whom I'd spoken to beyond a polite nod. I knelt to pick it up, my fingers brushing the rough paper, and my breath caught when I saw the handwriting, slanted, shaky, but unmistakable. It was my grandfather's script, a man I'd called Grand-Père, whose stories of our family's past had ignited my love for history. But Grand-Père had died 6 months ago, a fact I'd learned through a cold obituary notice, my family never bothering to inform me directly. The envelope was addressed to me in his familiar scrawl, and inside was a single sheet, the ink smudged but legible. Lila, the truth is yours to claim. Look to the attic, it read, signed with a trembling Grand-Père. No date, no explanation, just those cryptic words that sent a shiver racing down my spine, as if the ghosts I studied had reached out to pull me into their mystery. I stood frozen, the letter trembling in my hands, my mind racing with questions. Grand-Père had always been my ally, the one family member who understood my passion for history, who'd sit with me for hours in Belhaven's library, spinning tales of our ancestors, Creole merchants, Civil War soldiers, and a great aunt who'd defied society to become a painter. Belhaven, our family's plantation estate in Baton Rouge, was a sprawling relic of the past, its white columns and moss-draped oaks hiding centuries of secrets. But I hadn't set foot there in 9 years, not since I left at 22, fleeing the suffocating expectations of my parents, Marianne and Paul Moreau, and my older brother, Julian. They were the epitome of Southern aristocracy. My father a respected judge with a steely gaze, my mother a society hostess whose smile never reached her eyes, and Julian the golden son, heir apparent to Belhaven's legacy. I was the anomaly, the bookish daughter who chose a modest career over their gilded world, and when I refused to conform, they disowned me, cutting me off without a dime, their parting words as cold as the marble floors of the estate. You're no longer a Moreau. The memory of that day still stung, a wound I'd buried beneath layers of research and solitude. But Grand-Père's letter tore it open. Why now? Why me? I poured my coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me as I reread the note, tracing the shaky loops of his signature. Grand-Père had been the keeper of our family's history, a man who'd loved Belhaven not for its wealth but for its stories, the hidden tunnels used during Prohibition, the slave quarters he'd preserved as a memorial, the whispers of a lost treasure buried somewhere on the grounds. He'd died of a heart attack at 82, or so the obituary said, but I'd never been invited to the funeral. My family's silence, a final rejection. Yet here was his letter, a message from beyond the grave, urging me to return to the attic of Belhaven, a place I'd explored as a child, its dusty corners filled with forgotten relics and the scent of old wood. I knew I couldn't ignore it. Something in my gut told me this was more than a nostalgic summons. It was a call to uncover a truth my family had buried. I packed a small bag, my hands trembling with a mix of dread and anticipation, and drove the 3 hours to Baton Rouge, the bayous and cypress trees blurring past my old Honda as I navigated the winding roads. Belhaven loomed ahead, its white columns glowing in the late afternoon sun, the moss-draped oaks casting long shadows across the lawn. It was as beautiful as I remembered, a monument to Southern grandeur, but its elegance felt hollow, a facade hiding something sinister. I parked near the fountain, its cherubs chipped from years of neglect, and steeled myself as I approached the double doors, the letter tucked into my jacket pocket like a talisman. My mother answered the door, her silk blouse and pearl necklace a stark contrast to my faded jeans and linen shirt. "Lila," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and disdain, her eyes flicking over me as if I were a stray she'd rather shoo away. "What brings you here unannounced?" I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "I need to see the attic," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, her lips thinning, but before she could reply, Julian appeared behind her, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He was 34 now, his dark hair slicked back, his tailored suit screaming wealth, but his smirk was the same one I'd endured as a child, the one that said I'd never measure up. "Back for a handout, little sister?" he taunted, sipping from a crystal glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. "We don't have time for your little history projects." I ignored him, brushing past them into the grand foyer, the chandelier above casting prisms on the marble floor. The air smelled of polished wood and my mother's jasmine perfume, a scent that brought back memories of stiff family dinners where I'd been the silent observer. My dreams dismissed as childish. "I'm not here for you," I said, climbing the curving staircase to the attic, their whispers trailing behind me. The attic door groaned as I pushed it open, the space unchanged from my childhood, cobwebs clinging to rafters, old trunks stacked against the walls, the air thick with dust and secrets. I searched for hours, my flashlight cutting through the gloom, until I found it. A locked chest hidden beneath a pile of moth-eaten quilts, its brass lock rusted but intact. My fingers shook as I pried it open with a hairpin, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside was a leather-bound folder, its edges worn but intact, containing a will dated just before Grandpère's death. I skimmed the pages, my heart racing as I read the terms. He'd left Belhaven and its assets, land, stocks, rare artifacts, a fortune worth millions, to me, citing my dedication to preserving history. Julian and my parents were disinherited, their greed cited as the reason, but the shock deepened when I found a second document, a forged will, also in Grandpère's name, transferring everything to Julian, dated after the real one. The handwriting was similar but off, the ink too fresh, the signature too steady for a dying man. I clutched the papers, my mind reeling as the truth crystallized. My family had stolen my inheritance, forging a document to erase me from Grandpère's legacy, ensuring Julian's control over Belhaven. I stormed downstairs, the original will in hand, my voice trembling with fury as I confronted them in the parlor. "This is mine," I said, thrusting the document toward them. Marianne's face paled, her hand flying to her pearls, but Julian laughed, his eyes cold. "You think a dusty old paper means anything?" he sneered, pulling the forged will from a drawer, its pages crisp and new. "We control this estate, and you're nothing here." My father, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice low and cutting. "You made your choice when you left, Lila. This is Julian's birthright." Their united front was a knife to my heart, their betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. My own family had conspired to rob me, using Grandpère's death to cement their lie, their greed a poison that had seeped into every corner of Belhaven. I stumbled out into the humid night, the cicadas' song a mocking chorus as I clutched the will, my resolve hardening. Julian's taunt echoed in my ears, "You'll never prove it." But I knew better. Grandpère's letter wasn't just a clue. It was a battle cry, a summons to reclaim what was mine. I wasn't the quiet historian they'd dismissed. I was a woman forged by history, and I'd unravel their lies, piece by piece, until their empire of deceit lay in ruins. As I drove back to New Orleans, the city's lights a distant glow, I vowed to make them pay, not just for the inheritance, but for the years they'd made me feel like I was nothing. The storm was coming, and I was its harbinger. The drive back to New Orleans that night was a haze of flickering headlights and churning thoughts, the bayou's misty edges blurring into the darkness as I gripped the steering wheel of my old Honda. The original will and the forged document from Belhaven sat on the passenger seat, their weight pressing against me like a physical burden, a testament to the betrayal that had turned my family into strangers. The humid air clung to my skin, the scent of swamp water and magnolia mingling with the bitter taste of coffee I'd gulped down to steady my nerves. I couldn't shake Julian's mocking laugh or my parents' cold dismissal, words that had cut deeper than I'd expected, reawakening old wounds I'd buried beneath years of solitude. Belhaven wasn't just a house. It was a 200-year-old legacy of Creole merchants, Civil War survivors, and hidden stories I'd once dreamed of preserving. Now, it was a prize my family had stolen with a lie, and I was determined to take it back, no matter how twisted the path ahead might be. I arrived home as the first light of dawn crept over the French Quarter, the jazz from a nearby club fading into a distant hum. My apartment, with its creaky floors and walls lined with history books, felt like a sanctuary, but the letter from Grandpère and the wills demanded action. I couldn't tackle this alone, not with Julian's resources and my parents' influence backing him. I needed allies, people who could help me peel back the layers of my family's deceit. The first person I thought of was Dr. Genevieve Laveau, a forensic historian I'd met at a conference 2 years ago. A sharp-witted woman with a knack for uncovering hidden truths in old documents. She owed me a favor after I'd helped her authenticate a Revolutionary War map, and I called her that morning, my voice tight with urgency. "Genevieve, I need your expertise. My family forged a will to steal my inheritance," I said, sending her photos of the 2 documents. Her response came hours later, her voice crackling through the phone with excitement. "The forgery's a mess, ink composition's off, and the paper's too new. It was crafted within 6 months of your grandfather's death, likely by someone with access to his study. I'd bet on Julian." Genevieve's analysis was a starting point, but I needed more concrete evidence to challenge the forgery in court or publicly. I turned to Ray Broussard, a grizzled ex-detective I'd once interviewed for a crime archive project, a man with a reputation for digging up dirt in New Orleans' underbelly. Ray agreed to help, his gravelly voice promising results as he took the case. Over the next 2 weeks, he unearthed a labyrinth of secrets that made my stomach churn. Julian had bribed a crooked notary, Pierre Duval, with $20,000 cash siphoned from Belhaven's accounts, a transaction Ray traced through a series of dummy corporations. My parents, Marianne and Paul, were complicit, signing off on the forgery to fund their lavish lifestyle. Recent purchases included a $75,000 yacht docked in Lake Pontchartrain and a $30,000 emerald necklace for my mother's birthday. But the most shocking revelation came when Ray uncovered a hidden ledger. Julian had been selling Belhaven's artifacts, priceless pieces like a 19th century porcelain vase and a gold pocket watch from a Confederate general, to a shadowy antiques dealer in Biloxi, netting him $150,000 to cover gambling debts that had ballooned to $300,000 with a loan shark. The betrayal was a knife to my soul, each discovery peeling back another layer of my family's greed. I'd always known Julian was ambitious, his charm masking a ruthless edge, but I never imagined he'd dismantle Grandpère's legacy for personal gain. My parents' silence during Ray's revelations, caught on a wiretap agreeing to silence Lila permanently if she persists, added a chilling dimension, hinting at a willingness to go beyond legal boundaries. I confided in Genevieve, who suggested I consult Tante Odette, a reclusive family cousin living in the bayou, known for her knowledge of Belhaven's hidden passages. Odette, a wiry woman with piercing gray eyes and a voice like rustling leaves, welcomed me into her shack, its walls lined with voodoo charms and old maps. She revealed a bombshell. Grandpère had confided in her about a secret vault beneath Belhaven's wine cellar, containing a collection of rare Creole manuscripts and gold ingots, worth over $7 million intended as my inheritance. Julian had sealed it off, fearing its discovery would expose his fraud. The vault was my key, a weapon to turn their lies against them, but I needed help to access it. I reached out to Marcus Guidry, a locksmith with a reputation for cracking old safes, who joined my cause after hearing my story over a plate of gumbo at a French Quarter cafe. Marcus confirmed the vault's existence, sketching a map from Odette's descriptions, but warned me of traps, pressure plates, and alarms Julian had installed. Meanwhile, my cousin Amélie, a fiery 25-year-old who'd been estranged like me, contacted me after overhearing my parents plotting at a family dinner. She'd recorded them discussing a plan to forge a mental health diagnosis for me, claiming I was unfit to inherit. a scheme to discredit me if I challenged them. Amelie, tired of their control, offered to smuggle me into Belhaven during their next event, an open house to sell the estate to developers, set for a Saturday night with 300 guests. I threw myself into preparation, working late nights at the archives to fund my plan, earning $12,000 from a rare manuscript sale. I hired Ray to surveil the estate, Genevieve to authenticate the vault's contents, and Marcus to disable the traps. Amelie gathered intel, revealing Julian's plan to pocket the sale proceeds, $10 million. While my parents plotted to flee to Europe if exposed, I also met a journalist, Tessa Duval, who'd been investigating artifact theft in the South, offering to cover my story in exchange for exclusive access. The open house loomed, a showcase of my family's stolen glory, but I'd be there, not to plead, but to unleash a reckoning that would leave them with nothing but ashes of their ambition. The night of the Belhaven open house descended like a velvet curtain over the Louisiana landscape, the plantation aglow with the warm flicker of lanterns strung across the moss-draped oaks, casting eerie shadows on the white-columned facade. The air buzzed with the hum of 300 guests, New Orleans elite, historians, and wealthy developers, all sipping champagne and admiring the restored grandeur of the mansion's grand hall. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, their light dancing on polished mahogany walls adorned with artifacts I'd once studied as a child, now polished for sale by Julian's greed. The scent of magnolia blossoms and expensive cologne mingled with the faint mustiness of history, a deceptive charm masking the storm brewing within me. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart a drumbeat of anticipation, dressed in a deep burgundy gown that hugged my frame, a stark contrast to the pastel elegance around me. In my clutch were a USB drive, loaded with evidence, and the vault key, its cold metal a silent promise of justice. Julian took the stage, his tailored suit impeccable, his dark hair slicked back as he raised a glass to the crowd, his smile a mask of confidence. "Welcome to Belhaven, a legacy I've preserved for generations," he declared, his voice smooth as southern honey. "Tonight we celebrate its future with a $10 million sale to Horizon Developments, securing its heritage." Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and my parents, Marianne in a sapphire gown, Paul in a crisp tuxedo, beamed beside him, their pearl necklaces and gold cufflinks glinting like their false pride. I watched from the shadows, my pulse racing, knowing this was my moment. Amelie had slipped me in through a side entrance, her eyes darting nervously as she adjusted the projector controls with Marcus Guidry, the locksmith, nearby. Tessa Duval, the journalist, lingered by the bar, her notebook ready, while Ray Broussard and two plainclothes officers waited in the wings, tipped off by my call. When Julian opened the floor for questions, I stepped forward, the room falling into a hushed tension as all eyes turned to me. "I'm Lila Moreau, the true heir to Belhaven," I announced, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Julian's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as I climbed the steps to the dais, my burgundy gown swishing with each determined stride. "This is my proof," I said, plugging the USB into the projector as Marcus activated it with a nod. The screen flared to life, displaying Genevieve Laveau's forensic report, exposing the forged will's ink inconsistencies and paper mismatch, dated months after Grandpère's death. Gasps rippled through the crowd, historians whispering as my parents' faces drained of color, their hands tightening on their glasses. "That's not the half of it," I continued, my voice steady as steel. The next slide revealed Ray's evidence, bank records of Julian's $20,000 bribe to notary Pierre Duval, traced through a shell company, followed by photos of the porcelain vase and gold pocket watch in a Biloxi warehouse, sold for $150,000. The crowd murmured, developers exchanging stunned glances as Elena Moreau, a renowned historian, stepped forward, her voice trembling with outrage. "This is a betrayal of our heritage," she cried, her words igniting a wave of disapproval. Julian stammered, his face flushing red. "This is a lie. Lila's fabricating this to ruin me," he shouted. But the screen shifted to Ray's video, Julian handing the pocket watch to the dealer, his laughter echoing as he pocketed the cash. The room erupted, guests pulling out phones, historians condemning the theft as my parents shrank back, their social masks cracking. But the real shock was yet to come. I held up the vault key, my hand steady despite the chaos. There's more hidden beneath this house, I said, moving to the wine cellar door behind the stage, Marcus and Amelie following. The crowd pressed closer as I unlocked the hidden panel, revealing Grandpère's vault, a steel door etched with Creole symbols. With Marcus's help, we disabled the pressure plate traps Julien had installed, the click of the mechanism echoing in the silence. Inside lay a trove of rare manuscripts, their pages yellowed but intact, and gold ingots stacked neatly, their gleam catching the lantern light. Marcus estimated their worth at $7 million, authenticated by Genevieve's earlier analysis. The crowd gasped, Julien lunging toward me with a snarl, but Ray and the officers intervened, pinning him as he struggled. Julien Moreau, you're under arrest for fraud and theft of cultural artifacts, Ray announced, cuffing him as my parents screamed, "This can't be happening." The chaos peaked when Amelie stepped forward, her voice shaking but resolute. "I recorded them plotting to frame Lila," she said, playing a clip from her phone, my mother's voice, cold and calculated, discussing a forged mental health diagnosis to declare me unfit, while my father agreed to handle me if I persisted. The crowd turned on them, developers withdrawing offers, historians shouting accusations as Marianne clutched Paul, their dignity unraveling. But the final twist came when Tessa Duval, the journalist, raised her voice. "I've uncovered more. Julien has a secret daughter, born to a maid he dismissed 5 years ago." She flashed a photo of a young girl with Julien's eyes, taken at a Baton Rouge park, the revelation sending the room into a frenzy. Julien roared, "That's a lie!" But the officers tightened his cuffs, his protests drowned by the uproar as my parents collapsed, their empire of lies crumbling before the elite they'd courted. The days following the Belhaven open house were a tempest that reshaped my world, the plantation standing as a silent witness to the wreckage of my family's ambitions. The humid New Orleans air carried the faint tang of rain as I stood on the estate's balcony the morning after, the dawn light filtering through the moss-draped oaks, casting long shadows over the grounds. The Grand Hall, once a stage for Julien's triumph, was now a battlefield of scattered chairs and abandoned champagne flutes, the air still thick with the echoes of outrage. Julien had been hauled away in handcuffs, his tailored suit stained with sweat and shame, his roar of defiance fading into the night as police vans disappeared down the drive. My parents, Marianne and Paul, had fled in a panic, their sapphire gown and tuxedo crumpled, leaving behind a mansion that no longer belonged to them. The weight of their betrayal lingered, but so did a sense of liberation, a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed until that moment. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. Julien faced charges of fraud, theft of cultural artifacts, and tax evasion, his $300,000 gambling debts exposed as the catalyst for his crimes. The trial, held in Baton Rouge 3 months later, painted a damning picture. Ray Broussard's evidence, Tessa Duval's photos of his secret daughter, and the recovered artifacts from Biloxi sealed his fate. He was sentenced to 12 years in a state prison, his golden reputation reduced to a cautionary tale whispered in New Orleans' elite circles. The black market dealer, caught in the sweep, turned state's evidence implicating Julien further, while the $150,000 in profits was seized to fund Belhaven's restoration. My parents faced civil suits for their complicity, their yacht repossessed, and their Baton Rouge mansion foreclosed, forcing them into a dingy apartment above a French Quarter barbershop. Their social standing crumbled, their invitations revoked, and their once-admired names became synonymous with disgrace. Amelie, my cousin, moved into Belhaven with me, her rebellious spirit a welcome presence as we navigated the aftermath. Her recording of their plot a key piece of evidence that spared me from their frame-up. I took possession of Belhaven, its 200 acres and historic treasures now mine to protect. With the $7 million from Grandpère's vault, authenticated by Genevieve Laveau as Creole manuscripts and gold ingots, I transformed the estate into a historical preserve, opening its doors to the public with guided tours and exhibits on Louisiana's Creole heritage. The diary from the vault, penned by a 19th-century ancestor detailing the estate's role in the Underground Railroad, became the centerpiece, its pages a testament to resilience I now embodied. The story, dubbed the Moreau Scandal by local media, exploded across social platforms with hashtags like New Orleans Justice and Family Unraveled, drawing historians, tourists, and curious onlookers to the plantation. I hired a team of archivists to catalog the artifacts, uncovering a hidden letter from Grandpere tucked into the diary's binding. Its ink faded but clear. "Lila, my heart, I knew they'd betray you. This is your legacy. Guard it with your soul." The words brought tears to my eyes, a final validation of my fight, a gift from beyond the grave that steadied me through the chaos. Elena Moreau, the historian from the gala, offered me a teaching position at Tulane University, her voice warm with admiration over the phone. "Your courage has inspired us, Lila. We'd be honored to have you," she said, inviting me to lead a preservation course. I accepted, stepping into a role I'd never dared dream of, my lectures filled with students eager to learn. Among them was Zoe Chen, a shy 22-year-old with a passion for oral histories, her quiet determination reminding me of my younger self. I mentored her, guiding her through her first project, a collection of Bayou elder interviews, watching her blossom under my tutelage, a bond that filled the void my family had left. The vault's wealth also funded a research grant, but the real surprise came 6 months later, when Amelie and I explored the wine cellar again, driven by a cryptic note in the diary hinting at a second vault. Behind a false wall, we found it, a steel box containing 3 million in uncut emeralds, hidden by Grandpere during a financial crisis, their green depths shimmering like a secret kept for me alone. The discovery was a thunderbolt, its value doubling my resources and fueling a new vision. I established the Moreau Heritage Fund, a scholarship for underprivileged historians, its first recipient a young woman from the 9th Ward who'd lost her home to a flood. My parents visited once, their pride shattered, their once impeccable attire replaced by worn coats. "We lost everything because of you," Marianne whispered, her voice hollow, her hands trembling. Paul nodded, his steely gaze dulled. "Can't we start over?" I met their eyes, my heart aching but firm. "You lost it because of your choices," I said, my voice steady. "Belhaven is mine now, and I'll honor it as Grandpere wished." They left, shadows of their former selves, their footsteps echoing on the gravel as I turned back to Amelie, who grinned, holding a newly unearthed map of the estate's tunnels. Months later, Julian wrote from prison, his letter a plea scrawled on lined paper. "I was blinded by greed, Lila. Forgive me," he begged. Enclosing a photo of his daughter, the girl from Tessa's reveal, her eyes a mirror of his. I read it in my study, the vault's emeralds glinting on a shelf, feeling no triumph, only a quiet pity. "You chose your path," I wrote back, sending the letter with a check for his daughter's education. A gesture of mercy I hoped would ease her burden, not his. I didn't need his remorse, I'd found my strength. Zoe's project won a regional award, her acceptance speech crediting me, a moment that swelled my heart as we celebrated with gumbo at a local cafe. One evening, as I locked the plantation gates, a courier delivered an invitation from the Smithsonian, asking me to speak at a national preservation conference, Elena's name at the bottom. The jazz of New Orleans floated on the breeze, a melody of resilience, as I looked out over Belhaven, its history alive under my care, a future forged from the ashes of betrayal. Have you ever been betrayed by family? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of drama and justice on this channel.